The Russian influenza, otherwise known as Asiatic influenza, was a dangerous flu pandemic that slaughtered roughly 1 million individuals around the world. The flare-up began spreading in 1889 and was the biggest 19th-century pandemic of flu. It was likewise the main genuine pestilence that occurred in the time of bacteriology. The underlying cases were accounted for in Bokhara in Central Asia, Turkestan, Athabasca in northwestern Canada, and Greenland. Inside a half year, the illness had tainted St. Petersburg, Russia. Just 4 months after the fact, the flu had spread all through the northern side of the equator. Fast populous development in urban regions over the globe assisted with making a pandemic. In the 20th century, the second significant flu pandemic was the Asian influenza of 1957, otherwise known as the Asian influenza pandemic. The episode was answerable for more than 1 million deaths. At the start of the Asian influenza pandemic, the infection spread all through China and the encompassing areas. Months after the fact, this season's cold virus had arrived at the United States and was brought in the United Kingdom. Just 3 months into 1958, the United States had evaluated that almost 70,000 passings were connected to the Asian influenza. An antibody was in the long run built up that contained the pandemic. As a major aspect of the Second Plague pandemic, the Great Plague of 1665 made pioneers close all open diversion and seal the debilitated in their homes to help forestall the spread of the infection. Taking all things together, London lost about 15% of its populace. Despite the fact that the city recorded roughly 69,000 passings, the genuine number is accepted to be more than 100,000. At the point when the plague showed up in a family, a red cross was painted on the entryway with the words, "Ruler, show leniency toward us." Later, the dead bodies were expelled and taken in a truck to a plague pit. In 1855, during the Xianfeng Emperor's reign of the Qing dynasty, the Third Plague pandemic began in China. This deadly bubonic plague eventually traveled through India and Hong Kong, killing at least 12–15 million people. India suffered the most casualties with more than 10 million deaths. This was the third major bubonic plague flare-up to hit European culture. The infection was at first spread by bugs during a mining blast in Yunnan, China. Losses from the Third Plague pandemic dropped to less than 200 every year in 1960. Around then, the World Health Organization established that the plague was never again dynamic. The deadliest influenza pandemic in history began in 1918 and contaminated around 33% of the total populace, or roughly 500 million individuals. Despite the fact that appraisals differ, it is accepted that the Spanish influenza murdered around 50 million individuals, including very nearly 700,000 Americans. The first flood of the flu happened in spring 1918, and it was commonly gentle. The subsequent wave was profoundly infectious and hit the world intensely. The Spanish influenza was at first found in Europe, the United States, and Asia before spreading over the globe. Survivors of the flu were biting the dust inside hours and long stretches of creating manifestations. The normal life expectancy in the US had diminished by 12 years after the Spanish influenza had been around for only 1 year. Schools, private homes, and different structures became alternative emergency clinics due to congestion in clinical offices. Isolates were forced, individuals were requested to wear veils, and organizations were closed down until the infection finished its destructive run. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, friend, will be much more interesting.